A leader in event education, the Event Leadership Institute offers on-demand video classes, interviews with industry mavericks, and online instructor-led professional development courses taught by industry experts. Visit eventleadershipinstitute.com for more information and to see a schedule of upcoming classes.
Are you a followers? Okay, so we're gonna call the Adler.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Executive Editor Beth Kormanik.
Welcome to GatherGeeks. Hi, David.
Hey, Beth, another podcast. This is fantastic.
That's right. So for this episode, you and I spoke with Susan Davis of Susan Davis International in Washington, D.C. She was inducted into BizBash's Hall of Fame in Washington earlier this year. Susan is known for these large-scale ceremonial events that are quintessentially D.C. They include the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, when she dealt with, as we'll hear, a hurricane and an earthquake in the same week, and the opening event for the Museum of the Bible, which took place just in late November. David, you're from D.C., so tell me, what does it take to be that quintessentially Washington planner? Well, some of these events are events for the history books.
Well, I don't even think that they think of themselves as planners. I think that they think of themselves more as sort of part of the catalyst that make Washington work. And that's kind of what defines a planner. Because, what the politicians, their number one job is event organizing for the most part. So they understand this routine and this game.
Right. There's events happening all the time. But then there are these, the type of event that Susan would work on her team is massive. First of all, major. It's full of the pomp and pageantry that Washington is known for, and that makes events really special there.
Yeah. No, I have I'm a very prejudiced on this one because I adore Susan and I've known her for many, many, many years, and she has been doing this for as long as I can remember.
Well, our listeners can learn a lot from Susan, so let's take a listen. Welcome to GatherGeeks, Susan.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we are delighted to have you here to hear about your career in events. And, one thing that sticks out to me as I read your bio is the scope and the scale of the events that you've worked on. I want to just read this, make sure I get this right, so that our listeners get a sense of the things that you have pulled off. So, for instance, the Women in Military Service for America Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. This was a 30,000 person dedication, a 15,000 person march, a 5,000 person gala, a 7,000 person event in Arlington Cemetery. This is more than 10 venues in 3 days. How do you pull that off?
Well, if you look at it from behind, you're not altogether sure how you do pull that off. But the truth is, you start with a vision, and I have to give the greatest credit to General Wilma Vaught. I mean, it was her vision for the memorial, and she was our leader. And, you just follow the general in so many ways. And in each instance, you had to have a tremendous plan, but it was kind of like planning for an army maneuver as opposed to planning for a social occasion.
Well, isn't it the same thing now?
Yeah, well, in many respects it is. But, for example, we did the gala in the Armory. The Armory in Washington, D.C. was used for the National Guard. They had never, ever done any kind of a dinner, social event, or whatever. We completely transformed it, and everyone who walked in, whether they were going to the gala or they were part of the National Guard and happened to be there, were just blown away. It was really exciting and actually a whole lot of fun to take something that is just so completely different from a venue you might think about and transform it into, a perfect occasion for these women. And I'll tell you what really drove us more than anything. You can think logistics, you can think the PR side, you can think all of this. What it really was all about, what drove us more than anything, was that the majority of the people coming to this were women who had served in World War I or World War II, and would probably, many of them, never ever travel again. Wow. So we wanted to make it perfect. And consequently, no task was too big a task. You just figured out how to make it happen. And I will tell you that the night before the dedication, the day before the dedication, and the night before, it rained so hard. we thought we might not be able to have it the next day, but the sun came out in the morning and we were able to put it all back together again, and it was really extraordinary. I'm so proud of this. It's one of the things I'm most proud of in my entire life.
Well, you told me before we started the podcast about an event and a project that you have going on that sounds like it's going to be actually bigger than anything you've ever done.
Well, it's not. In one sense, the building is bigger than anything,
well,
because
concept.
This is the Museum of the Bible. The Museum of the Bible is going to open November 17th in Washington, D.C., and there will be a whole week-long series of events, actually a month-long series of events. But this is the first museum of its kind in the world, and it's the most technologically advanced museum in the world. Your docents will be digital, and the exhibitions are incredible. It's not only the history of the Bible; it's the Bible in history. It's also the Bible in fashion, the Bible in government, in politics, in sport. They have Yogi Berra's Bible, as a matter of fact. So it's going to be a phenomenal event space. It's also going to be, I have to tell you about the theater. The theater is so technologically advanced that as you're sitting in the theater, with a flip of a switch, you can be in a concert hall, you can be in a Nazarene village, you can be in, the Sistine Chapel.
So the event you're working on is the
opening?
grand opening?
Is the grand opening. It's the dedication. It's a gala. There's a gala. The gala's at the Trump Hotel, and then there's a dedication and a whole series of events there during that week.
So with an event like that, a planner could take that in the totally wrong direction, and it could be very themey or just I can see how it can be done wrong. How do you approach it to make sure that it's done
right?
I
think first of all it has to be respectful.
Yes.
It really has to be respectful, and it has to, they have done such a tremendous job of building this museum without a message except the message of the Bible, and having people learn about the Bible. So it's about education, it's not about proselytizing. So all of the events have to sort of fit into that. And what's really interesting about it is that there are so many stakeholder groups and so many people that you want to pull into this that aren't stakeholder groups. So you have to think about all of that. So again, I have just never ever in all the events that I've done started with how do you do things logistically. I always start with who are we trying to attract, who will be there, what kind of message do we want to deliver, how best do we do that, where can we make lasting impressions, how can we carry this message around to people who aren't there at that event, and then building that event around whatever that strategic plan is.
So do you when you think about, you've created a huge PR agency in Washington, D.C. over many years, and I've known you for many, many years. Do you approach it, you obviously approach it strategically, so events are just one of the tools.
Right.
When do you like to use events as a tool? What is sort of the thing that says, that's the strategy we're going to use, we're going to go for events?
Well, we've been really, really fortunate because we are very often brought in to manage, to develop, to strategize large public events of great national and sometimes international historical significance. We just finished doing an event in Kansas City to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the U.S. entering World War I. And the whole object of that event was to use it as a means to educate Americans about why the U.S. went into the war and the effect of U.S. participation in the war. And we're all, people really focus on, of our age and younger, World War II, and beyond. A lot of people don't think about World War I, right? So we had to create an event that would truly educate people about that war, and it was all done with music and poetry and literature from that war. And one of the most extraordinary things that happened in that was that we had, I think it was 8 representatives from countries that were either U.S. allies or that we fought against who spoke. But they didn't speak in a speech. What they did was they read a letter or a poem or a passage that reflected what was going on in their country during that war. And the most extraordinary one of all of them, I thought, was the ambassador from Hungary read a letter from her prime minister to the U.S. ambassador. At that time, they were very close personal friends. And the prime minister, the letter goes something like this: "My dearest friend, Ambassador so-and-so, with great regret and personal remorse, I must ask you to leave our country. I never expected our countries to be in this position. I hope that the world will change and we will once again be able to be friends." It was just so powerful. So, it's really just so much points to, what I was trying to say is that I think that the messaging for events is the most important thing, and that you use that to build everything else around it.
And you mentioned before the importance of carrying that message beyond the events. So how do you think about that, and how did you do that in this most recent example?
Yes, well, live streaming, of course. And the whole digital world we have now, all of technology has completely changed how you can carry that message. What we did for the Holocaust Museum, what we did for the World War II Memorial, the Women's Memorial, etc. We didn't have the advantages of technology to carry that message out, so you just had to use free media as much as you could. Most of these events don't have the opportunity to use advertising. Mm-hmm. So now things have really changed, and I think it's just so exciting. You can carry whatever you're doing out to the world, using live streaming and, all other forms of, connectivity, technology connectivity. I love it. I absolutely love it. I just feel like it's so sad. You get to an event, you've worked so hard on it, and you have 5,000, or in the case of World War II Memorial dedication, we had 160,000 people, but it was it. That's all. You had people who were there. It wasn't carried anywhere else. So only those people in that spot could see what you were doing. Mm-hmm. Now, people can participate wherever they are, anywhere in the world.
One thing that you know a lot about is protocol, and it's important in this town especially. But I wonder, as things become more informal as a society, what you think the importance of that is today?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important, and I don't think it's just protocol is important in Washington, D.C. I can say, we do a lot of things for the military, so obviously protocol is never going to change in that. We do a lot of things with the international community and with governments around the world. Protocol is never going to change with that. I think it would be a huge loss if we sort of put that aside and just tried to be informal about everything. I think, just personally, I feel like it just adds such a measure of respect to whatever you're doing, and I just would hate to see that lost, And I also think, it's not something that children are being taught right now, and I think it's important for them to see and to experience, and sometimes they're not going to get it at home, or they're not going to get it in their school, or maybe even their place of work, but maybe they will see it, somewhere through live streaming, through YouTube, through whatever, and realize that there's just, a whole lot more to,
ceremonies and pageantry
exactly.
are something that last generations.
It's exactly right. Well, they've lasted all generations, right?
Yeah.
And we still have it, and I don't think that we should let it go.
Mm-hmm. So go back to when you started out in this industry, PR events, whatever you called it that you did then, and what advice would you give to 21-year-old Susan?
Well, first of all, I think that people who are interested in this space need to be more well-rounded than the ones that I see are coming along initially. I think people think events are just all about meeting people and placing, chairs in a place and entertainment or whatever. And, you can tell from just what I've been saying here that I just see it in a much more holistic way. And so when I'm hiring people, I don't really care that you did your sorority event or your fraternity event or whatever, and you handle the logistics. I'm way more interested in what else you did in school, that you have that event experience and interest, because that's important, but I want to know what else you know, and I want to know that you have an interest in history, and I want to know that you can communicate really well, and I want to know that your math is pretty good, because we all know that math is a big part of events, and people never talk about that, but whether it's budgets or camera throw or whatever it happens to be, that just seems to be lost on a whole lot of people. So, I'm always looking for the more well-rounded person, and when I bring people in, especially my interns, I really try to teach them the bigger picture, the holistic way of looking at things. And I will tell you something else. I'm going to give you a good example of this. And it's also learning to think on your feet. And that's something that we have to grow into, obviously. Some people come by it naturally, but a lot of people can learn it. When we did the dedication of the Martin Luther King Memorial, we had a hurricane and an earthquake in the same week. We were completely set. We were ready to go. Hundreds of thousands of people had been in town. And we get the earthquake, so it ruins the National Cathedral, so we have to quick find other venues in 24 hours. And then the hurricane comes through. We were completely set for the dedication. We had to completely rip it down, get everybody out of town, total crisis communications, and then we had to plan it all over again, So it takes the measure of a person, right, who can just be steady, okay, this is what we have to do, we're just going to keep moving forward. Not everybody can do that, but you know how good people are in a crisis situation.
And how do you approach that? What do you do? How do you act?
Well, you have to be calm, because more than likely almost everybody around you is not. So let's start with that. I think that some people have that skill and some people don't. I see that over and over again. But in that situation, you first of all, you had to think about messaging. Okay, how do you message to people to first make them aware of the fact that, this is a serious situation and you need to make plans to leave, but please come back because this will happen again, And at the same time, you need to convince everybody. We had the president, we had the cabinet, we had all the top military people, we had all the top, African American leaders in the world, everybody else. You just had to be able to convince them that this could happen again. You can come back. We need you. We want you. It was a big challenge, probably one of the biggest we've ever had.
That is interesting.
Yeah, but you pulled it off.
Yeah.
We did twice. We pulled it off twice.
At least you had to be able to do it again.
Yes, yeah, we did. Yeah.
What's your process after an event? What do you do to? I think the temptation is just to move on to the next, but you can learn so much. So what do you do?
The Navy has a great word called hot wash. And it's what they do after an event, after an incident, whatever it is, to talk through what worked, what didn't work, how they need to be better. That's what we do. We do a hot wash immediately after an event, where we just drill down what were we great at, what weren't we great at. What does the client need to know next time? What do we need to know the next time? How can we make this better? How can the facility make it better, et cetera, et cetera. We're really serious about doing it. We do it right away because you forget. You wait a week or two and it's gone.
So it's the next day usually, or the next?
Well, you can. Often the next day is hard. And often, if it's a weekend or whatever. But within the week, we're on it. We do a hot wash.
Is it a download of information?
Of everybody involved in the event. But what we say to anybody involved in the event before they get involved in the event, and certainly as we get ready and go into it, is keep track of every single thing that you think is great and every single thing you think it isn't. I want you to every night say, we could have done this better, we should do this way, next year we can do this, et cetera, because that will all feed into our hot wash. And we'll just be better.
But what does a hot wash look like? Does everyone
it looks like
announce what they think is the issues, or they write it down in advance? Or
no, they write it down for themselves, but then we just get around a table and we go, okay, I'll start. I thought you were great at this, this, and this, and this, but we had some issues with registration. We had some issues with
honesty.
Absolutely, it's honesty, but it's valued honesty. It's kind of like, how can we be better? Because we want to be the A team.
Right.
That's how I look at it. How do we make sure we continue to be A team and we can always be better?
Well, I think on that note, the hot wash is a great tip for everybody, and it sounds like it made you guys become a superstars in your business.
Well, thank you. Hope so.
So,
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. Please let our listeners know how they can reach you.
Yes, Susan.Davis at SusanDavis.com, or our website is www.SusanDavisInternational. Love to hear from everybody. .com, sorry.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we're back in the studio, and the scale and scope of events that Susan and her team pulls off is incredible, but she's also a keeper of DC's protocol and tradition. David, do you think that's a dying art, or that it can be and should be preserved?
I think that the people that are preserving it are doing an amazing service to our industry and our country, because it's those rituals are what keeps things on track for the most part. And the idea of actually creating these traditions and creating these rituals and keeping them going is a very, very important endeavor.
At the same time, are they evolving, or should they evolve?
They're changing a lot. I think social media has changed them. What was protocol in the old days may not be protocol today. But I do believe that the idea of having structure and having, everybody talks about algorithms. Basically, protocol is an algorithm of how people talk to each other and how people communicate and how people have done it over the years.
Okay, interesting analogy. Yeah, and DC is certainly a place where there's room for pomp, for pageantry, for ceremony, and for tradition.
And you have to write it down, because people change so radically in terms of different administrations. A new administration comes in and they don't know what the protocols are. So if they're not written down and codified, it doesn't make any sense. You don't remember them.
Right, and I think there are two points that derive from that. One is that having a multi-generational team, like Susan was talking about, so that you're constantly training the next generation and passing that on. And the second would be the term that she introduced to us during the podcast, this hot wash session, where you really delve into what you did well, what needs to improve, and so you're constantly being reminded of those things. What a great concept!
I love that hot wash concept. I think it's military.
That's what she said. Yeah.
And I've heard it since we've spoken. I've heard it a bunch of times, and it really is an important sort of protocol of doing an event.
Right. I find that when I learn a new word, all of a sudden I'm hearing it everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. It's incredible.
Great. Well, thanks to Susan for sharing that wisdom with us.
So, Beth, what's going on with BizBash?
Well, since we had a DC planner on our podcast today, I thought I would let our listeners know that if they want to learn more about events in DC, to check out our list of DC's top 100 events, which just published on BizBash.com. So there were some shakeups this year, as you would expect with the new administration. And, we encourage everyone to check that out. And you can let us know what you think on Facebook or Twitter at BizBash. The fun of doing lists is sometimes arguing about lists and where things are placed and what was left off and what was on there that maybe you disagree with. So we encourage everyone to join that conversation.
Yeah, they're fun. It's fun to criticize them.
Yeah, exactly. And we won't be offended.
Exactly.
It's the life of creating these lists, and it's fun to talk about. So, we'll be back with you next week. And until then, gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on. Invest in yourself and your staff with self-paced online event education designed to fit into your busy schedule. Subscribe to the Event Leadership Institute for only $25 per month and gain access to an extensive on-demand video library of classes, as well as interviews with industry leaders. Best of all, you can watch classes in small pieces or all at once. For more information, visit eventleadershipinstitute.com.